September 1st was Labor Day here in Canada, a national holiday, and I thought, after the most challenging chapter of my year finally wrapped up last week, let's just say, wrong one, I figured I deserved a break. So I gave myself a little holiday, drove out of Toronto about an hour to a place called Springridge Farm. On Google, it has a 4.5-star rating, which is pretty impressive for over 2,000 reviews, and honestly, it lived up to it. Cute little rides, apple cider made right there, a gift shop that was dangerously tempting, and all these little details that showed just how much heart the owners put into it. The whole thing was way better than I expected. But hold on, this is not a vlog. I'm not here to show you how I spent my day. This series is about misunderstandings, because this little trip reminded me of something. When people think of China, they think of skyscrapers, cities, growing overnight, everything shiny and modern, but often described as kind of the same everywhere. That's the stereotype. But is that the whole picture? Not really. China also has its own farm economy. You could call it Nongjiale, literally happy farmer experiences. In the last decade, it's been booming, but also crashing. Especially during the pandemic, thousands of these places disappeared. And that side of China, I bet most of you haven't seen it. In China, I've been to quite a few Nongjiale. When I was a kid, every spring and autumn, a relative of ours who had some influence back then would invite the whole extended family to his countryside farm. We'd spend a weekend doing all kinds of things, picking beans, digging up wild vegetables, fishing, picking strawberries, eating rustic farmhouse dishes, even sleeping in bare concrete rooms with no paint on the walls. Outside the window stretched the endless fields, and out in the yard was a tiny outdoor latrine. On stormy nights, with thunder and lightning shaking the whole sky, it felt like a living oil painting. Those were real experiences. Simple, but unforgettable. Later, when I joined the workforce, I went on company-organized team-building trips to Nongjiale, and those felt completely different, much more commercialized, all-in-one packages. Many of them looked suspiciously similar. You know, copy and paste layouts. Besides the usual fruit picking, most of the activities boiled down to barbecue, karaoke, mahjong rooms, and standardized guest houses. At some point, you couldn't really tell if you were in Beijing or Chongqing, the north or the south. The experience was identical, and even worse, the so-called farmhouse meals often weren't made from local produce at all. The ingredients were bought from nearby markets, sometimes even pre-cooked, yet the prices were higher than what you'd pay for the same dishes back in the city. And then came the pandemic. The industry went through what can only be described as a brutal stress test. According to data shared by a Bilibili creator, by 2024, more than 80,000 farm stays had shut down across China. In some districts, where there used to be hundreds of these farms, now only a handful are still around. Part of the problem was homogenization. Everyone saw a hot trend, jumped in, and built the exact same country escape. No differentiation, no unique storytelling, just a pure replication. And when the shock of COVID hit, those copycats couldn't survive. Another factor was short-term thinking. Instead of planning for sustainable growth, many farm owners were chasing quick cash, cramming in dining halls, overbooking weekends, running it like a banquet hall with chickens in the background. It wasn't exactly the rural paradise city people imagined. And honestly, this kind of short-sighted development isn't unique to farms. You see it across many industries in China. In the early days of China's rapid economic growth, much of consumption was shaped by the legacy of the planned economy. Back then, Nongjiale often catered to group bookings, company outings, collective trips. It wasn't personalized, but it suited the mentality of a generation raised in big families, where collective experience mattered more than individual choice. Today, the main force of China's consumer market comes from the post-80s, 90s, and especially the 2000s, most of whom grew up at the one-child generation. For them, the shift has been dramatic. Individualism grew stronger. People began to care much more about personalized experiences and how they felt individually, which meant that the old copy-paste, one-size-fits-all model of mass rural entertainment lost its appeal. What once felt like a collective treat started to look, for younger generations, like a bland, overpriced package with nothing authentic to offer. When I looked for similar examples in big cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Hangzhou, and Chengdu, most of what I found on Dazhai Dianping fell into the same old trap. Ticket prices were high, activities were generic. Those that made it through clearly weren't just lucky. There was something behind their survival. A solid example is Dazhai in Guangxi's Nongjiale rice terraces. Unlike Springridge, which is run by one family, Dazhai is essentially a big family business. Originally, this was a remote minority area, mostly Zhuang people. Among other ethnic groups, China has multiple ethnic autonomous regions. These areas hold a degree of self-governance to protect their cultural heritage while still operating with the national framework. In 2003, when a road finally connected Dazhai to the outside world, the village's Nongjiale economy exploded. But here's the difference. Their business model is highly organized. The entire village adopts a shareholding system. Every household is a shareholder. That means everyone's interests are aligned. Villagers aren't just a cheap labor while profits flow upwards to a few investors. Instead, each family directly benefits, which creates a rare sense of unity. The results speak for themselves. According to reports, more than 60% of households there now earn over 500,000 RMB annually. During peak season, many rooms exceed 1,000 RMB a night. In 2022, the village was even recognized by the United Nations World Tourism Organization as one of the best tourism villages. A quick glance at Trip.com reviews also confirms it. Whether budget stays or premium guest houses, nearly every property scores highly. Beyond accommodation, the village also offers handmade crafts, ethnic singing and dancing performances, and an immersive experience of minority traditions. I've never been there myself, but from what I can gather, Dazhai has preserved a unique cultural identity that cannot be copy-pasted. And that's where it echoes Springridge. Both are driven not just by money, but by a sense of passion, heritage, and community. Now back to my trip in Canada. Springridge Farm isn't massive. It's not Disneyland, but it felt authentic. I actually spent more than half an hour just wandering around that little gift shop. And yes, I ended up buying 4 things. A bottle of organic Sicilian citrus crush from England. Bright, tangy, and refreshing, tasting exactly like the one I'd had back in Britain. A jar of matcha-infused creamed honey. My first time seeing this flavor, and as a matcha addict, I just had to grab it. A small ceramic baker, basically a mini casserole dish, just the right size for my Chinese steamed egg, and a watermelon mojito mix from Canadian brand, I don't speak French, with ingredients sourced from Brazil but blended and packed here in Canada. The shelves were full of other eye-catching items too. Chili sauces with beautifully designed labels, salad dressings, artisan pickles. And speaking of pickles, here's a thought. Wouldn't it be great if the farm offered small samples or paired them seasonally with their lunch menu? For someone like me, who hesitates to buy a whole jar without knowing the taste, a little trial bite could turn into a purchase. Instead of walking away, I might have left with 3 more jars in my bag. The products weren't random, nor were they trying to imitate someone else's trend. They were chosen with care, reflecting both taste and curiosity. And it wasn't just the products, it was the people. While browsing the gift shop and even during the wagon ride, I had small chats with different staff members. Every single one of them was genuinely friendly. Some looked like high school or university students working part-time, while others were older, almost grandmotherly figures. The warmth from each person gave the place such a positive energy. I didn't happen to catch any seasonal displays this time, but from the way the farm was already curated, I can only imagine how creative and festive those setups must be. That sense of joy and pride from both the owners and the staff is exactly what makes the farm feel alive. Not just as a business, but as a passion project. Later, when I browsed their website, one line on their recruitment page caught my eye. A strong culture of caring for each other is what makes working at Springridge Farm so special. That really spoke to me. At this point in my life, all I want is to be surrounded by positive, healthy communities and to stay far away from toxic organizations of any kind. And then I thought, why not try? My YouTube work gives me flexibility, and their site says they welcome people from all backgrounds. If I ever do get hired, I could even make another episode about what it's like working there. A Chinese girl in a Canadian farm, probably making a mess of things. I find both Dazhai in China and the Springridge Farm in Canada so inspiring. They show that authenticity doesn't come from copying trends, but from rooting your work in culture, community, and genuine passion. My bigger hope is simple, that in the years ahead, we will see more farms around the world, whether in China, Canada, or anywhere else, run not just as businesses, but as living passion projects. Places that bring people together, honor their heritage, and remind us that authenticity has no borders.